Hello, guys, and welcome to Grant Writing Today. I'm your host, Rodney Walker, and today I'm especially excited to have a special guest coming all the way from Kenya, Nairobi, over in Africa, who's going to be joining us today, none other than Mr. Michael Karagu. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Rodney. It's such a pleasure to be here.
It's an honor getting a chance to have you. I'm excited about getting a chance to connect with you and learn more about you as a grant professional and fundraiser. Michael is the owner, guys, of Bell Consultants, and he's doing some great work in this area. Michael, tell us as we get started today, tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got started as a grant fundraising specialist in your area.
Yeah, thank you, Rodney. So this story starts way back. I worked as a manager for nonprofits in Nairobi. A couple of years ago, that was 13 years. I worked as a manager, as a senior manager for nonprofits. And at that time when I joined as a technical person. I had just left medical practice to join this nonprofit that was doing medical work, and I was thrown in the deep end. One of the things I didn't know is, I could treat and I could support other health workers, but that job now required me to raise funds for the program as well. And
Wow.
At that time, it was crazy because time after time we applied for grants, and time after time they were not awarded. They were not awarded for a couple of years
Wow.
in a row, and that's when our team decided to do things a little differently. We got a trainer who trained us on how to do grants properly and all the other systems that are required to make a grant successful. So basically, that's a first interaction I had, and following that training, we got some really good track record. We established some really solid relationships with donors, and the funds started rolling in. So about 4 years ago, I left the nonprofits to become a consultant, and at that time, my choice was to become a public health consultant to help people with policies and strategies. And every nonprofit I talked to were talking about, they didn't have resources. Every time we got into a conversation, the conversation always seemed to end up that we don't have enough resources. So I decided to take that route because that seemed to be the places where they really needed my support, because I had learned how to do this. There were systems that I learned how to build, and so I've been doing that for a couple of years now. It's been 4 years of working with people in the nonprofit sector, leveraging the skills that I had learned as a nonprofit manager.
Awesome. So it sounds like from your journey, you started out in the deep end and had to learn how to swim. You swam your way and got that money, and now are helping other organizations to do the same.
Absolutely. It's an interesting journey that many people just get into it, and many people are thrown in the deep end without knowing how to do it. I was privileged to be trained by a really good grant professional, and I think many people should do the same. Having the technical skill is not always equal to having the grant skills that are required to make things function.
Yeah. And I found that to be the case with a lot of professionals as well as grant professionals that are kind of fall and stumble into it because they're working and then need to raise those funds and need to have those systems. They're trained in their actual profession, but not necessarily in fundraising. So it's great that you've learned that skill and made it your own, and also have taken it and grown it into a practice. What challenges do you see most in this industry as a grant professional, and how how have you been coming alongside of your clients to help them to overcome some of those challenges?
The biggest challenge that I see is that many nonprofits think the grant fundraising is about writing a grant proposal. Mm-hmm. And in fact, many of them who approach me, they're usually approaching me to help them to write the grant, which is all good. But, as you know, if that's all you're thinking about, if the view is limited in that perspective of just writing the proposal, you are, first of all, in perpetual competition because you're only responding to the request for proposals. And, the success is minuscule in such a scenario. Your chances of winning such grants is low, is often very low. Writing a good grant should be supported by systems. And I know, Rodney, you are the master of grant systems, which, you need to leverage, your relationships. Even as long as you write the grant, you should be leveraging relationships. You should be creating visibility for your organization. You should be looking internally and thinking, what systems do we have that support this fundraising effort? Do we have a strong organizational strategy? Do we have strong policies in place? So I think the narrow view of grant fundraising to just writing grants, I think that's the biggest problem I face at the moment. And so what I do, I go in and work with organizations to show them, hey, look, there's this whole spectrum of things that we need to do. And, with working with you and many other grant professionals, I worked out a framework that just spells out this the systems that are required. And I call it the risers method. The risers method brings together the relationships. Creating solid relationships as the anchor for solid grant fundraising. And the second letter there is I, which is impeccable visibility and an impeccable reputation. You should be doing things to show your visibility, but your reputation has to be guarded. I find some people are not guarding their reputation. They're allowing other people to speak about them. They're not speaking about themselves, and that's risky. Then the other thing is systems. We have to look at organizational systems. Do we have the right governance? Do we have management systems in place? Do we have the right technical teams for implementation? Do we have the right policies? Do you have the right strategy as an organization? And even the grant fundraising within itself is a system. Do we have a team in place? Is it just the one person who's left in a corner to be writing grants and sending them off? So that's the S. And E is effective proposals. That we go beyond just having a well-written proposal, but having one that's effective, one that demonstrates capacity, one that demonstrates alignment with the mission of the grantor. The grantor and grantee missions have to be demonstrated. The alignment has to be demonstrated within the proposal. So that makes it beyond a well-written proposal. It has to be effective.
Yes.
And then the R is research. We have to be constantly doing research on the prospective donors, but also for the grant application. So R is about researching the donors, researching the grants, and making sure that we are keeping up with information and we are keeping up with relevant information that will create solid leads and solid relationship building tactics.
That's
And
all.
then S, which is the last but usually overlooked, which is, many people will walk away once they receive the grant. They do a pretty bad job of maintaining the experience for the donor. So S is superior reporting, having a strategy to make sure that we have solid reporting as we move together with this funder, and making sure that we are building upon this newly established relationship and making sure that over time this grantor becomes a strong ally for our organization. So basically that's it. And then having this within a healthy mindset that, we are not approaching grants like they are they are not the everything, but we also not we are not giving up. We have to have a healthy mindset as we approach grant fundraising. So that's the risers method.
Oh, it's awesome. And I can see how using that approach, Michael, can bring a lot of success to the organizations that you're working with and helping them to have a more comprehensive approach. Are you primarily working with clients in the Nairobi area or outside of that area as well?
So for the last couple of years, I started off with the organizations that were within my network within Nairobi, but through LinkedIn, the network has been expanding. I have a couple of clients from the West Africa region. I've received inquiries even from people down South Africa. So technology is basically pulling the world together, and I don't know where it's going to take us next.
It's really interesting. That's why it's like we have the grant writing today, because it is pulling us so close together and making the opportunities for us to connect and learn from each other even greater. Let me ask you this, Michael. What do you see? What do you see things going in terms of grant writing as it relates to your country and where you're at? What are you seeing on that end that seems like it may be an interesting, or maybe something that may be promising, that may be coming around the corner?
I think one of the most interesting things that I'm observing is there is a real challenge to maintain grantor attention. Mm-hmm. And because of all these things that are happening, there are many causes to be addressed. There are many organizations now also just asking for their funding. So nonprofits have to be really solid in a way that they maintain the attention of their grantors, and that requires skill. It requires a new space that I've found that is becoming more effective, which is storytelling. Storytelling is becoming an increasingly important way for nonprofits to communicate. Even the most technical subjects, if they cannot be broken down to stories that explain how their funds are impacting communities and individuals within the communities, it's very difficult to maintain the attention that we need to have a consistent relationship and consistent flow of funds. So my take has been that nonprofits have to embrace storytelling as a new way. Well, it's really not new. It's how how humanity has communicated over time. But nonprofits have to learn how to break this down, to break down whatever we are doing into stories of how we are impacting people with these funds we are raising, and making sure that that goes into the grant applications, but also goes into our reporting mechanism. It goes into our visibility. For me, I think that's a really big area that
Yes.
nonprofits should invest in.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think what you have mentioned in terms of the storytelling is huge. I think the other thing, Michael, that you made mention of is that, this has always been the case. Storytelling has always been very important. But the fact that now there's so many different ways of being able to get that story out and to communicate that. What are some of the ways that, with some of the clients that you've been working with, that you've been helping to assist them in amplifying and telling their stories? Are there any examples that you can give that may help some of those that are listening today?
I think the the biggest way is video. Just having short videos of people
Mm-hmm.
really changes perceptions. And as that people say that currently 80% of online activity right now is video. So nonprofits should not miss out on this. Many people are spending time on YouTube and all these other video platforms. And
Mm-hmm.
the nonprofits that I work with, I find that as a very useful way of getting their stories out, and
Mm-hmm.
and just telling the story of their work. But it takes a bit of skill to make sure that the video communicates whatever they want to communicate. Authentically, it has to be authentic, but it also has to be really skillful, because some videos come out as as a pity party when you're talking about beneficiaries, and that's not what grantors want to see. Grantors want to see the possibility of becoming heroes,
Yeah.
um, and that's the thing that um, has helped many nonprofits to communicate their story, just showing the potential to become heroes as nonprofits and as grant makers.
That's awesome. And I love that you have incorporated that into what you're doing, and that you're showing your clients the importance of that. I think a lot of times when we look as grant professionals, we sometimes put ourselves in boxes by just limiting to what we do to writing. And I love that you're taking and helping others in those organizations that you're working with to see that, hey, you've got in your you have in your possession, if you have a phone these days, likelihood all the broadcasting that you need to be able to get your message out. But I think, Mike, one thing that you also said that really struck me is the importance of having a strategy behind what you shoot with that camera to communicate that message, so that it doesn't come off as a pity party. Uh,
Yeah.
tell me this: and what has been, for those who've been sharing that insight with and have been helping them to look at things differently and getting their stories out? Are there any interesting tidbits of information, or ahas, or things that have come out of you helping your clients to do that?
Yeah, there've been some really interesting things coming out of the field when people. There's this one client who went out to do these videos, and what she thought she was doing a video for around a health, a health intervention. What they came out with was information about how their intervention empowered the women. It was a health intervention for women. And so my client came back and told me, you know what? This has really clarified what I should be communicating. I have been communicating about these health interventions, about how we are giving these women treatment. But these women are telling us that, they feel empowered. They feel like they've been able to take over their lives. They feel, like the world is opening up for them. Their options are opening up for them. So the whole idea of working with, even working with our grant professionals, is helping people to communicate better, to communicate what's the real impact of our work, what's the real impact of your work, that, people didn't really care about the pills or the treatment they were getting, that they felt loved, they felt compassion, they felt all those things that are very difficult to quantify, are now emerging within the communication from this nonprofit, as a byproduct of just getting out and talking to the people and trying to figure out how do we talk about our story better. So for me, that was enlightening even to me, that this is a clarifying moment for many nonprofits. You need to clarify what it is that you're serving to the communities, beyond the interventions. Some of them are doing housing, but it's not the structure that people look for. They're looking for security, and that is a much easier thing for people to relate across the world. People will be able to relate to a sense of feeling unsafe, feeling insecure. So it's a much easier, relatable way to communicate once you really get into it.
I love it. And I love the fact that you're doing that. It shows, even as I'm listening to you, the fact that what we do as grant professionals is much bigger than simply write information on paper. And I'm also hearing and listen, that you've got to think outside of the box to tell that story, because once we start telling that story, the story not only impacts those that are hearing the story, but it also impacts those that are in the story. And I think that's phenomenal how you've been doing that. Michael, we're out of time for today, but I want to give our listeners a way to reach you if they want to know more about what you're doing, and if any of them want to connect with you. How can people find you? I know that you and I are connected on LinkedIn. I know you're there, but can you let us know other places that they may be able to connect with you and find you?
I think LinkedIn is the very best way to reach me. Michael Kiragu, there on LinkedIn. Website is coming up. We'll be sure to let you know once we have it up and running.
Awesome. That sounds great. So guys, make sure that you connect with him. He's doing wonderful things. Mike, I want to thank you for the time that you shared, the insight that you gave us today. And thank you for all the wonderful work that you do to help the wonderful nonprofits that you are working with. And I wish you much continued success in all that you do.
Thank you so much, Rodney. It's been a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this awesome audience and to share in your awesome energy today.
Thank you. You're welcome. Have a good one.
Thank you, Rodney.